Bueno, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo le va a todos? Buenas tardes. Hoy es un día muy importante para todos nosotros en este primer streaming que hacemos acá en el ICBA. Agradecerles a todos los que están, como audiencia. Y bueno, tendrán que perder nuestros primeros, errores o cuestiones que vamos haciendo a medida que esto va sucediendo. Así que gracias a todos por estar. Y para inaugurar esta sesión tan importante de streaming, vamos a introducir a través de la doctora Florencia Castro. Florencia es la jefa del área de cardiopatía estructural, a dos súper expertos de la Clínica Mayo, a propósito del PreCongreso que vamos a hacer mañana. Ellos van a estar participando con nosotros, y que vienen de una institución del cual nosotros admiramos profundamente, porque entienden, como creemos entender nosotros, que la asistencia tiene que estar vinculada a la investigación y que la investigación tiene que estar relacionada con la educación. Así que comulgamos profundamente en esos ideales. Así que bueno, le voy a dar la palabra a Florencia. ¿Qué tal, Florencia?
Hola, gracias, Alberto. Bueno, y gracias por unirse en nuestra primera experiencia de streaming. Y la verdad que queríamos que con este streaming ustedes conozcan de cerca por ahí a estos invitados que para nosotros son tan queridos, porque creemos que tienen mucho para aportar y a veces solo los ven en una charla en el PreCongreso o en el Congreso Argentino de Cardiología. Y la idea es que los conozcan un poco más de cerca, así que vamos a estar hablando en inglés. Ustedes tienen la opción de traducción simultánea ahí en el YouTube. Y bueno, les presento el doctor Bui Nicomo, que es el jefe de la clínica de valvulopatías de la Clínica Mayo, y al doctor Amash Nasser, que es especialista en enfermedades congénitas cardíacas del adulto, y aparte fue un ex CEO de la Clínica Mayo en sus clínicas de Abu Dhabi. Así que vamos a empezar a hablar en inglés y les vamos a hacer algunas preguntas. Alberto, ¿querés empezar con la primera?
Yes, thank you very much for being with us. It's a pleasure, and thank you a lot for your participation tomorrow in the pre-congress. That's a very important meeting for us. So we will start, Dr. Amash, for a more general question, but related with the Mayo Clinic, and you can make some kind of introduction about the Mayo Clinic at this thing that I was talking about some minutes ago, that is a place that patient care, research and education are in the same connection, that make that quality of patient care that Mayo Clinics have, no?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be here and to participate in this live streaming. Definitely, I mean, Mayo Clinic is a very well-known 160-year-old institution where education and research are like the driver, the propeller of the practice. So, you know, people come seeking solutions to their medical needs that are unmet elsewhere, and that is done by a group of experts with from different specialties, multiple different specialties and subspecialties, where the framework of continuous learning and continuous teaching is there, built from the grounds up, that help propels the three-shield importance of Mayo Clinic, like other academic institution, where either education and research are very important. I wish we have answers to all the questions we have when we see patients, but you know very well in cardiology, although we learn a lot, we know a lot more than ever before, but there's still unanswered question, and this is where the research comes into mind. So why can we learn more from our past experience, or can we look into the future and say what potentially can work for the benefit of the patient? Because we don't have answers to all the questions at this time, no matter how advanced we are. And even we have answers, how can we do it faster, better, closer to where the patients are? And this is what we provide at our institution.
It sounds real, because some years ago I visited the Mayo Clinic, and I found a characteristic that I would like you to explain a little bit in deep. That is the way that you organized in a disease-oriented way. So we take a lot of your ideas to do here, and we work in programs, of disease programs, and also in clinics. So can you give us
all healthcare organizations go through different transformation at different time because of the changes in the healthcare environment. And at one point in time, in the recent past, we felt in order for us to be as competitive and as good as we need to be to help serve the patient's need, which is our primary value, we need to create those service lines across within the same specialty, but across many subspecialties that will help us create those teams that help us take care of the patient. We're always looking at, okay, what can we do to help take care of our patient, and creating that team-based approach with the service line, the heart teams, the valve teams, all those teams make us much stronger, because you can add so many disciplines to that team, the multidisciplinary team approach in different specialties, that as if you work as a team base, which is part of Mayo's integrated approach, and including the education and research field coming into the practice, that's for us, we felt this is the winning solution or secret sauce. It's no more secret at this time, to help provide the best service possible to serve the needs of the patient, and also to promote that collegiality that we have among the team members that makes us happy at what we want to do every day when we go to work, honestly. And maybe Vui wants to comment on this, but it benefits the patients as well as the staff, and at the end, the institution.
And before you say something, did you find some resistance in the teamwork? Because I imagine surgeons with a cath lab and all that, does it generate some resistance, or how do you work with that?
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for having us here for the live streaming and for the participation in the conference. It's been fantastic. No, I agree with Nasser 100% and all the things that you've said so far. The relationship of the patient care, education, and research that's built into the Mayo Clinic fabric. It's part of the logo. There's interconnected things. And then the specialization, Mayo Clinic has always sort of fostered specialization in certain areas, which then if you specialize a lot, then you need to have that collaborative relationship with someone else who specializes in something else. And so the collaborative environment and the specialization environment has always been sort of part of the Mayo Clinic. And there wasn't so much resistance in terms of figuring out how best to take care of patients, because if you tell me that now I'll be housed in the structural heart disease clinic and all that I'll be doing is focusing on valvular heart disease, and this is my passion, then I'm all for it. And then same thing for the electrophysiologist, same thing for somebody who loves hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. But then you have to kind of build these bridges amongst the different subspecialties so you can work together. So not a lot of resistance, but creating anything new obviously does have some challenges in the beginning, and then you have to work through those things.
But I mean, the nature of the work that we do, Florencia, if you think of, not like adult congenital heart disease, so I don't speak about our clinic, but if you think HCM clinic, the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, well, they need to work with electrophysiologists. Yes. They need to work with medical geneticists. They need to work with great cardiovascular surgeon. They need to work with a lot more than one person. It's very hard nowadays to be a one-man show. You're much stronger as a team, and it's very good for everybody, not only for the team, but most importantly for the patient. When the patient feels, wow, we have a team taking care of me, where we are a phone call away from each other, and we get the answers quickly, this is very impressive for the patients.
No question asked. In some ways, then it's common that one doctor looks or takes care of a lot of patients, but in this case, we are talking that several doctors are taking care of one patient.
With one quarterback.
Yeah, good.
With
Yeah.
one captain of the team, which is the primary provider. Like when I take care of my patients, I'm the quarterback of the team that help me take care of my patients. So things come with my acknowledgement and my support, because the relationship, I think the best relationship that you can have is with the patients, is with you and them building that trusty relationships, and they will trust what you say. But even when other people come in and part of the team, they're going to say, okay, what do you think, Dr. Amash? What do you think we should do? And so on and so forth. So I think there has to be a captain of the team who's willing to learn and ask questions. How can we best serve our patients?
So one of the things I was advised on when I first came on staff by Dr. Buzz Miller from the Echo Lab, who was head of the Echo Lab at the time. He said, okay, now that you're coming on staff, don't be afraid to ask for help. So be okay asking for help, and we encourage you to ask for help. Then the other thing is, when we're trainees, they said to us, you should be able to call anyone at any time who's an expert in whatever area, and there should be no pushback when you call them for advice. And so this is sort of the environment that we find ourselves working in, which is amazing.
And that hasn't changed. I've been there for 31 years. That hasn't changed a bit.
That's making a huge education environment, no? And also,
It's a great environment.
yeah, to make a culture of asking questions. That's a very simple to say, but really important at the moment of the patient care, no?
And when I was there, I saw like a lot of patients coming from every part of the world and every part of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So how is your relationship with the quarterback of a doctor that is in, I don't know, in Abu Dhabi or in France or in I don't know, how is your getting in touch with that doctor that is the doctor of the patient?
Well, for me, it's very important to be in relationship with the primary caregiver near home. It's not like we want to have the patient. We want patients to come to Mayo for because we're a destination medical center for complex care. This is why patients come to us predominantly, and but they need to maintain a great relationship with their primary caregivers at home. So again, I'm going to say it one more time today, is communication, right? Mm-hmm. Having clear communication with the referring physician, getting them involved in what decision making, because we review records before we see the patient, so we know what the expectations are. And I have a habit of calling the doctor, no matter where they are, or send a letter in relation to what happened to the patient, especially if we have an intervention. The surgeon typically will call again after surgery, and to keep them informed. And now with the electronic environment being so handy between different institutions, depending on the healthcare records that you have, then electronic records that you have, it's easy to communicate. In fact, recently I was calling a physician to tell them about the patient, not from Mayo, from elsewhere, and he told me, after I talked to me, he said, Nasser, I have been following everything on Epic, on an electronic environment. I can see everything that you're doing. Thanks for the call.
Referral doctors are able to get into the medical records from the outside the clinic?
Yeah, if they are part of the same electronic health records.
Good.
And the patient sign away, patient agrees to share records, then yes, we can see records and tests. Most important thing is the test done, so we don't repeat tests. But not all organizations are under the same electronic health environment.
Yeah. No, this is true. But it facilitates this whole thing of communication with the outside or referring physician, and so it makes it easy to have that electronic medical record. And so the patient has to sign consent to have their medical record and information shared amongst the different hospitals. Not everybody's under the same electronic medical record, but if you are, and I think this was the impetus behind sort of integrating the medical record and making it sort of one record, so to speak, irrespective of where the patient is. And so that helps quite a bit.
I understand that we have the same idea about the integration of the referral physician. No? We call them integrated physicians. That's the concept. But my question is, how do you promote in your young doctors to go with this idea? Probably for us is very, very important, but the idea is how do you promote for young doctors this interaction with the referral doctor?
Yeah, I mean, we try to build it into the training. So when I went through internal medicine, I did my internal medicine training at Mayo as well, and then stayed and did my cardiology fellowship training there. But even during internal medicine, every patient encounter, at the end of that, you had to generate a letter to the referring physician summarizing what you did for the patient and all the things that went on for their patient. And so every day after clinic and on hospital service, it's communicating through the hospital dismissal summary. And then in the outpatient setting, it's communication through the letter that summarizes the episode of care for the patient. So every time it's just a stack of letters. You have to review them, you have to sign them, but this becomes part of your training. And so then you end up integrating that in your day-to-day practice as well. The importance, you recognize the importance of communicating with the referring physicians, as Nessa had said, and then you just kind of develop ways of doing that. Now, it's true that some of us do the communication better than others.
Yeah. I was going to say,
but you know, this is it has to be part of the training and part of the expectation. Now, what you do with that element of your training once you become your own person is up to you, but I think it has to be integrated in the training and emphasized to be as important as everything else that you do.
And the fellows and the residents see us doing it. Now, we get the reminder in the electronic environment when an episode of care is done, which means, okay, if you haven't, indirectly telling us, if you haven't done the communication, do that communication. I used to send a lot of letters before. Now I prefer to talk to them in person to build that relationship with the referring physician. Now this is at the departmental level, but at the institutional level, we have something called the referring physician office.
Good.
Where we send questionnaire. I remember for a long time we send questionnaire to referring physicians, say, okay, tell us, what are the things we do well, what are the things we don't do well? Have we gotten your patients sooner than, because most of the time it's about access, but it's also about communication.
Like in HCAPs.
Yeah.
Like a kind of HCAP from...
Yeah, we do it. So RPO, the referring physician office, is key to building the relationship and improving it at the institution level, but we get data at all the way down to the department divisional level that is shared with the leadership that get to know, oh, you know what, maybe we should do this differently because of the data that we have provided. So local level as well as higher level.
Yeah.
So you shared with us before, like your history or how did you get to Mayo. So maybe some people want to know how was your story. If you want to tell us something about that.
You start.
So
we have long stories now.
So I'm originally from South Africa, and I came to the United States to study medicine with the idea or view of going back to South Africa. I was done. So maybe technically I'm still on my way back, but this is many years ago. So I did my undergraduate training in the United States, went to medical school in the United States, and then did my residency and fellowship training at Mayo Clinic. And the reason how I ended up at Mayo was basically in my mind I had to find an institution that was known in South Africa. So I was aiming at training at sort of known institutions in the United States, and somehow got lucky to end up at the Mayo Clinic. And I had some support, obviously, and guidance in terms of getting there. So my parents were still in South Africa, but I had an uncle and an aunt in New York that effectively became my parents in the United States. And I had another set of parents because I came as an exchange student in Oregon. So those guys are in Oregon. And then I had my people in New York, and then I had some other family in Philadelphia that sort of shepherded me through the process, and I ended up applying to Mayo, and I was fortunate enough to get in, and I've stayed there since.
Well, I came in through a different route, although the common thing between Vui and I, so I came from Lebanon, and after doing getting my MD from the American University of Beirut, I, again, wanted to come to the U.S. because that's the best training for us, and come back, like Vui said, to Lebanon and practice cardiology. Now, I came in and did residency at University of Iowa, then University of Louisville for adult cardiology. But then I applied, when I applied for Mayo, I told you that story. When I applied for Mayo fellowship, I wasn't good enough to enter as a fellow, cardiology fellow, like Vui did. So he started at the better baseline. But then I went and did adult cardiology, but I wanted to do adult congenital heart disease, and this is where I applied for the subspecialty training at Mayo, and I came to Mayo in 1994, and after 1 year they asked me to stay, try it. I said, okay, I can try for 1 year, and this is 30 years ago. And some of the things that that's very meaningful for me is that I didn't come through the usual route like most of the residents and fellow. I came in as a subspecialty person trained elsewhere, coming to do subspecialty training at Mayo. But once you're in the system, and once you are provided the opportunity to grow and become who you want to become, because the support, the resources, the environment is really conducive to achieving great things academically and personally and so on and so forth. So I grew up to become a cardiologist, a professor, an administrator, a leader, and I wouldn't be able to do it without the resource, the support that I had around me. Like I do with everything I do in life. So it's really, for me, it's an opportunity to be able to grow and develop, which Vui and I had given different opportunities to become who we want to become. It's a choice we make.
And the good thing, is that you do, like, you go to your countries and you participate in meetings, no?
Yeah, we do.
Teaching other cardiologists.
You used to make interaction with your own
Yes,
definitely.
Absolutely. And I think this is sort of one of because at the end of my training, when there was an opportunity to stay at Mayo, it wasn't an easy decision to make. But then the advice you get is just stay. There's no rush to go back. Just stay there and so then do all the things and avail yourself of all the opportunities that I had Mayo. But one of the reasons where it's easier to stay is because you can participate in other things outside of Mayo. So there are plenty of opportunities for volunteering elsewhere around the world if you want to do that. And one of the things that I do is participate in the South African Heart Association annual meeting. So we have some relationship with South Africans there. So at least there's that sort of relationship where a person feels like you're giving something back to South Africa, which was the idea in the first place. And then maybe there's that sort of bi-directional knowledge transfer from us to them and from them to us. So there are those opportunities to do that at Mayo.
You were talking about the characteristic environment of Mayo Clinic, and brings to my mind the topic of research. So I would like to ask your opinion. How was that? How do you develop, Mayo Clinic develop that environment, and how was your interaction with that, and to reach what you are now?
It's a very good question, because we're often asked this question. Well, first of all, there has to be some support from the institution. This is who we want to be. We know what the vision is. Research is integrated with practice and education to take care of our patient and to become who we want to become forever. So there's a huge support and drive from the top, but also from bottom up, from the team on the ground. I was telling team members here at ICBA, because when I came to Mayo in '94 as an adult congenital heart disease fellow, I did some research in Louisville, Kentucky before, but when I was surrounded by people, by colleagues, by mentors who really, just by talking about things, I say, wow, that's interesting. I want to do more and I want to learn more. And the data is there. There's plenty of patients to generate data and outcome data. Then and the resources around you and the support around you, even though you're not given time to do it, but you can do it. You can carve your own time to do it. Then you become successful slowly. I remember the first AHA abstract I presented in New Orleans. I remember the first ACC abstract. I remember the first paper I published. These are things that then you want to do more and more, especially in the environment that most of the people around me, my mentors, really were more supportive of that. And especially, again, when you have a question you don't have answers to, or you might not agree with what has been published, because it happened in my case. And then you put a challenge to yourself, okay, let's try to find answers, and there's plenty of data, and with the support and the system around, which is very important, to be able to publish and get into research. So this is where I got into research. I didn't come to Mayo thinking about that. I went to Mayo to learn how to take care of the adults with congenital heart disease, and especially with Dr. Warnes at that time, and she was my mentor. This is why I went to Mayo. And then I learned from the team of experts that I had around me. So it's the environment that helped me become a professor of medicine.
Yeah, that's true. But it's baby steps in the beginning, right?
It is a baby step.
Baby steps.
It's case,
Yeah.
maybe case, I didn't do a case report,
Right.
maybe as a resident,
Yeah.
but it might start with a case
With the
report,
case,
right?
Yeah. So it's baby steps, and we were talking about how the research is an expectation during internal medicine training. It's an expectation during cardiology fellowship training, and you have all sorts of research. I mean, there's the basic research, there's the clinical research, there's the translational research, and we count everything. If you do a case reports that you publish, that that's something. That's an academic activity. And I think most of us, love the fact that you are supported in pursuing, because I think most of us are clinicians at heart, at least some of the, but then you have opportunities to do the research and to educate, and they give you the resources and the environment and the support to do it. And it's baby steps in the beginning, and you just sort of grow from there.
My question is, where do you think that my question is, where do you think that should appear the research ideas? Is from the organization, or from it's from top to down, or the down to top?
Well, I'm not sure. We're more like
I understand the concept. In my case, as a medical director, I am absolutely convinced that the importance of research. But then I don't have perhaps the ideas in terms of the details of some diseases. So, what may be your suggestion?
So, there are certain things that you are inspired by from the top. For example, Mayo is big on AI at this time, and that is something driven by the leadership of the institution, and it's applicable now to all our specialties, especially in cardiology now, right? So sometimes it is a drive that is a vision toward the future, but many of the research come from our own patient experience. I'll tell you a small story, maybe Florenza and you know it from. Like, I was seeing a patient as a fellow or a junior staff with Dr. Warnes, with a ventricular septal defect. She told me, Nasser, tell me about the VSC. I said, well, it's a hole between the two ventricles that cause volume overload of the left heart chamber and potentially pulmonary hypertension. I talked to her about what I knew. She said, she told me at that time, this is it? I said, well, that's what I know. She said, well, just like men, not all VSDs are alike. And then, but she wanted me to talk more about the difference between membranous supracrystal inlet VSD, muscular VSD, the Garbodi defect, and I wrote a paper.
Wow.
Wrote a paper in Annals of Internal Medicine 25 years ago or so. It makes me feel old. So these are the things, or when you take care of patients and you don't have answers to the question you're asked, and it's not published, then you say, can we answer that question? And there are multiple questions that we have no answers to in the field of cardiology, although we're better, because there's a lot more publication now than ever before, but there's still unanswered questions. So it can come from the ground, from patient care, or it comes from different sources. It could be from readings, just getting to read the literature, right? And you say, well, maybe what I'm reading is not true. Maybe we should do it differently, and look at our experience. So it comes from different source, but it has to come from from individuals, the teams talking about it, and also some direction about the vision of the institution, because you need to have the resources and the support to be able to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, and I can't overstate the importance of having a structure in place that where you can have the data sets, right? So, or keep the data. And then providing the resources for junior staff or whoever it is that wants to do research to be able to go through the process of getting the data, doing the statistical analysis, and all the support that people need to get a project from the beginning to end. And then the collaboration with different specialties is key. So an example of a project that touches on the same things was the question I had for the pathologist was the weight of the aortic valve after you take it out, an excised aortic valve. How much does it weigh depending on the severity of aortic stenosis? So I called the pathologist, and they said, well, we don't weigh the valves. And I said, oh, missed opportunity. So then we have to, starting maybe tomorrow, yes. We have to collect the valves that we excise and weigh them. And then the pathologist said, no, you don't have to do that, because we can look at the specimens that we have in storage. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, every valve that's ever been taken out of any patient at the Mayo Clinic is kept in storage.
Whoa.
So then I said, right. So then I said, wow. So then we went through the process of, I want the last 10 years. And like, no, that's too many. So then we sort of came up with a compromise, enough numbers. So then they retrieve those things, dry, weigh them, and give us the data. So then you have the echo data, you have the valve weight data, you have the clinical data, and you can sort of ask important questions around the data set that you have, right? So you ask questions that you can answer with the thing that you have. But I think the fact that the environment allows for that, me as a person who's a clinician first, but is interested in, you question different things, and you have the resources to answer those questions, it's an unbelievable sort of environment.
Yes. It is. When Vu was talking, it reminded me of something that he said that's extremely important that I took for granted. So because I was in Rochester for 26 years, then went and led Mayo's joint venture in Abu Dhabi for 4 years plus. And at that time, we were creating the research institute of that hospital and of SSMC, and we started from near zero. But again, we wanted to become Mayo Clinic. We wanted to build in the research enterprise, but we didn't have the structure. We didn't have statistician. We didn't have the clinical nurse specialist. We didn't have the ingredient that you need to succeed. For example, if we have a project that I need a nurse to help me do things, well, there's nurse available to help me provide, get the information or take care of the patients, and I have a statistician. We always have statisticians we work with throughout our career that we trust and build a relationship. So that support is very important. That structure, let's call it this way, is very important to to conduct meaningful research, because even though you can learn statistics, but there's nothing better to have than to have really a statistician on board with you, especially with large data sets.
I'm going to do a very difficult question.
Wow.
Wow.
So,
Let's get closer.
so
to
I'm
the-
thinking the people that are hearing us, that maybe they're in a consult alone, or they are doing consults alone, and maybe all this is very far away from their practice. And I'm thinking about how Mayo Brothers said some things in the I don't know, 18,000.
160 years ago.
Yes, 160 years ago, that apply now. And what do you think of that? Things that apply now can be useful for a doctor that is seeing his patients and wants to do good medicine. And the plus is, how do you think that will apply in the future? If you think that only teamwork will be able to make the cardiology or the medicine work, or do you think that the doctors that are doing their medicine in their places that maybe they don't have all the structure can make it?
Well, I can start and let Vui, because as soon as he said something, I said, oh. I mean, because I talked about it a bit recently
Yes.
with you guys, is the concept of collaborative medicine,
Yes.
right? That, especially nowadays, the amount of information that is there is so much, even within cardiology,
Yeah.
that it's very hard to know everything. The information is there at the fingertip. You can find it. But when you're taking care of patients, it's so important that to work with others that know more about other things that you do, and you accept the fact that I know a lot, but there are certain things the electrophysiologist might know better, the obstetrician might know better as far as taking care of a pregnant woman, and so on and so forth. So that idea of collaborative medicine that existed at Mayo from long time ago, that's what the Mayo Brothers taught us long time ago, is there to stay, especially when you're taking care of complex patients. You're not taking care of simple things. If you're taking care of the top of the pyramid care and complexity, you need that collaborative medicine. But now it's aided with all the advances that we have around us that makes us see patient more efficiently, get to the diagnosis faster, think about different kind of treatments, and so on and so forth. So that idea of collaborative medicine, I think, is there to stay for complex, especially for complex care, but now aided with all the changes, everything that has happened since the Mayo Brothers taught us more than 100 years ago.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And then just trying to leverage access to information that we've never had such access to information before. But I mean, it comes back to doing the best you can with what you have. And so if you are there by yourself or with a smaller team and you don't have the subspecialties, it's doing the best you can with what you have, recognizing that there's, lots of expertise and knowledge out there. And if you need to refer your patient, refer the patients to the people that can get the job done. But I think leveraging all the tools, the AI, if you can, access to all the information that we have access to now that we haven't had before, technology in terms of whatever technology you can bring to your own practice to do the best that you can with your environment, and then refer the patients, when you need to.
It sounds great, because that's a collaborative oriented medicine. That's networking. It's the idea, the concept. No? I would like to make a question. We talk about artificial intelligence as a characteristic of Mayo Clinic. So we are not. We started. We were now in a laboratory setting in a very small place, and now I taking you to a huge and very big platform. So. What do you think that is now the idea of the artificial intelligence in your daily work in Mayo? And what do you think is going to be the influence for the medicine itself.
I
make a very huge.
I'll just give a big picture and then let Pui,
Yeah.
because I know he's involved in some of those projects. The idea is just to help in the whole concept for me as far as AI in healthcare is to help us make the diagnosis faster and treat the patient better and faster, whether it started with, in radiology or EKG, AI and stuff. That's what the whole purpose is, to make us better and treat the patient faster. I think this is the whole concept. And now to do that, you have to have the data, unbiased data from different institutions. That's why we create those platforms at Mayo, and to analyze and try to apply this to other people. That's one way to transform healthcare delivery at a larger scale, rather than having one physician go and see a patient somewhere and come back. And that's why that's a larger scale based on that. But as far as day-to-day activities, because we want to talk about it, maybe we have AI EKG available for all of us.
Yeah.
We can predict based on 12-lead echocardiogram the likelihood of heart failure, the likelihood of amyloidosis, the likelihood of hypertension. It's all atrial fibrillation.
Yep.
And same thing, we have all those tools now are available that based on our own data. That's the neat thing, is data. But again, you have to always be careful about the data source when you talk about AI.
I mean, it's a fascinating field, but in my mind, I think AI and the things that come from AI, I mean, that has to be a tool for us to achieve these things that we want. Make the diagnosis earlier and get the patient appropriate care sooner and all of that. And I think you can leverage all the technology in this sometimes resource-limited settings. For instance, if you can train the EKG to look for probability of atrial fibrillation, cardiac amyloidosis, aortic stenosis, diastolic dysfunction, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, all these different things from an EKG. So then that person who's alone in the clinic does the EKG,
that's the way.
and you don't have an echocardiogram, you don't have access to a cardiologist. But if the EKG reading can say, hey, this patient, the probability of aortic stenosis or these different diseases is so much, then you can take that information, leverage that information somehow, and get the patient the care they need, much sooner. And so AI, I think, to me is sort of a tool, and not only in EKG, but it's extending to echocardiography. They're training the echo just to look at the aortic valve in the short axis and long axis and predict how severe the thing is.
Or diastolic dysfunction.
On the EKG, all these different things, radiology, pathology, and all of that. But I think it's it's a powerful tool that we're leveraging. So in my clinic, let's say I see a patient with aortic stenosis, I usually will pull up that matrix of the ECG probability of different things, and then I see somebody's asymptomatic, and you look at the EKG, and the probability of severe diastolic dysfunction is high. You look at the echo says indeterminate diastolic dysfunction. That ECG tracing and probability of diastolic dysfunction is a very prognostic indicator in how the patient will do over time. And so that sort of changes the whole discussion of when do we intervene and all this kind of thing. Are you really asymptomatic?
Or how to monitor the patient.
How to monitor the patient and all of that. So we're using it on a daily, at least I use it all the time. And then the EKG can also, one of the fun things about that is it predicts the sex of the patient. So it has probability of male or probability of female. And it's always nice when it correlates. So you can show them that and they go, oh, this thing works. Yeah,
So I think we have to finish.
That's a great way to end it.
Thank you very much for us. It's very, very inspiring to have you
thank
here.
Thank you for having us.
And
it's great to be here again.
Tomorrow we wait for all the people that want to join us in our Congress. And I don't know, Alberto.
No, thank you so much to be here. This is Florencia organized this first streaming session. That is the starting point of this. And thanks so much to be with us to share basically. That's a very honest thing to share your experience that make us to enhance our practice. And so there is a lot of years that we have been talking with both of you and your team, and we grow a lot in the last 10 years or more than Francia started the relationship with Mayo, and we are very proud about that. So thank you very much.
No
and
problem.
Tomorrow we have more than 10,000 people there, so we're going to make, I think, a good job also tomorrow.
Well, we're looking forward to maintain and really thrive with this relationship that we built over the past so many years. It's always fun to come and meet the team at the different levels. Today's meeting with the residents and stuff was phenomenal. There's so much to share information, and I think that sharing knowledge is very important part of our daily mission, whether you do it at the clinic level or you do it at an international level like we're doing here. So thank you for inviting us this year
thank you
again.
very much. It's always been amazing, and it's to me it feels always bi-directional, that I learn a lot from you guys, and hopefully we have good things to share with you, and it's always an amazing experience.
Oh, great.
Yes.
See you tomorrow.
All right, thank
Nos
you.
vemos mañana.
Bye.
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 Buenas tardes a todos, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos al segundo bloque de nuestro podcast, nuestro streaming acá de ICBA, presentando un poquito a los invitados que nos van a tocar, tener la suerte de compartir con ellos en nuestro precongreso el día de mañana. Este bloque se va a estar dirigido principalmente a lo que es investigación clínica e innovación en investigación clínica, así que tenemos la suerte de contar con Eugenio Cingolani de Cedars-Sinai, electrofisiólogo, que nos va a hablar un poquito de marcapasos biológicos y qué se viene de todo eso. Y también tenemos la suerte de contar con el doctor Michael Gibson y con Cecilia Bait, que son expertos del BAME Institute, que nos van a hablar un poquito sobre el futuro de los ensayos clínicos. A partir de ahora, toda esta sesión va a ser en inglés. Esta breve introducción fue en español, pero para nuestros invitados va a ser todo en inglés. Tienen la posibilidad de tener traducción, ¿no? Si no me equivoco, tienen traducción simultánea, así que se la pueden seleccionar y escuchar todo de forma traducida. So welcome everyone, thank you for being here. We've just been talking behind the scenes, so it's great to have you guys. We're going to start maybe on this side, but everyone please feel free to chime in. I think one of the most important things that we were discussing is what does the future of clinical trials look like, and what are the challenges that we must overcome, and how we can apply that, in further science going onwards.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here today. I think the pandemic taught us a lot. We really want things that are cheap, fast, and good, right? The three things that we always want. How can we get there? I mean, right now we're spending about $4.4 billion to develop, say, milvexian. That's not sustainable. What if we could do those kinds of trials for 1 to 2% of the usual cost? That's where we need to be, while preserving quality and while meeting timelines. How can we do it? I think, sadly, we've got to probably cut out some of the bricks and mortar. So we have just completed a trial where there was no bricks and mortar. It was direct to participant. So we randomized 34,000 people over the internet, over an app, to an Apple Watch or no Apple Watch. 2% of the usual cost. We had about 90% of the people being compliant with filling out the electronic patient-reported outcomes, so we got a lot of information. They were wearing an Apple Watch, so we got terabytes of data for each patient. So we have a lot of information, and that's going to be very informative. What I want to do is have also patients give the results, present the results. This is really something the patients are doing. So I think in the future we're really going to demand that we have much more virtual approaches to trials that are much more cost effective. In the future we'll be finding trials like we found them through electronic medical records, social media, television, every which way we can find them. I think you'll see people getting drugs shipped to their home after they're randomized. You'll see people going into the home to do ultrasounds or other tests. You'll see blood tests being done in the home, or you'll click on a QR code and get your blood tested somewhere. So I think we're trying to get rid of the bricks and mortar and maximize the direct connection to the patient to get them engaged, get them involved, and then reduce costs dramatically and speed things up.
Do you think AI can help at some point in reducing costs?
Well, I think the way AI will help is after we gather the data. Let me also say, how are we going to know if someone had an event? We're going to be looking at their claims database, their insurance data, or in their electronic medical records to see if something happened to them. That'll cut costs, and we can use AI for that. But AI is also going to be helpful when we take those terabytes of information, crystallize it, and figure out what's the right dose for the right patient at the right time for the right duration. Right now, we have submitted something to a major journal where we're doing that. We're saying, how can we use AI to not assess your risk right now, but to assess your risk not 1 year from now, but iteratively over time. That's what we do as doctors, right? We have the patient come back and we say, well, you know what, you haven't been bleeding, so you're tolerating the drug pretty well. Your risk of bleeding moving forward is different than when you started. So we iteratively assess risk. But what we also do is we ask the patient, would you rather have a bleeding stroke with disability or, say, an ischemic stroke? And we take their preferences into account. So we're doing all that with AI to predict for you at this moment in time, and that can change, here's the right dose for you based upon everything that we know. So I think that's how AI is going to inform us, more patient-specific recommendations.
Eugenio, what's your opinion about this way that trials can change? I mean, I really agree that we need something to change. My fear is that when we have those pragmatic trials, then we can say the results, we didn't achieve the results because we just look at the natural evolution of the patients, and they didn't come to see us and to really qualify events like they do. What's your opinion from your side?
No, I think I agree with what Dr. Gibson said, and I think you have an important point. But I think also as trialists and as clinicians, we need to learn to adjust to these new modalities and need to trust these new modalities to assess our patients. Good example is like it was said before in the pandemic. Before, we used to follow all our patients in person, and in our arrhythmia clinic we had to try to follow them remotely, and we found out that was a great source of information to do the trials. And now we incorporated the wearables, and the patients have their own app, and we start trusting as the medical community, that for the assessment of our patients. And as a result, I think we need to mature and trust that system to be able to develop trials that way. But I think it's something that is coming. It's gonna grow even more, and I think artificial intelligence is gonna help. I also think artificial intelligence has to be controlled in some way, because also has the ability to incorporate multiple variables, and that can be good, but can also add a lot of confounders. And I think, and I'm a great believer that the trials have to have a hypothesis that is generated with some mechanism and some physiology behind it, and not only adding multiple variables and see what is statistically significant.
Randomly, something's gonna.
Correct. If you add enough variables, I think you have a chance that can happen. So I think it's very important to use the tools, but use the tools wisely. With hypothesis-related trials.
Yeah. I would
Cecilia?
like to add something. I think I agree with Mike completely on what you said. But I think that there are still some areas where we will be doing randomized clinical trials. And now I'm speaking as someone from Argentina, where we're, step behind in terms of how we can, have all access to medical records, because we don't have a unified system where we can, ask questions. So I think the overall field is moving to direct to patient, as Mike said. Of course, taking into consideration, certain things, and making sure that what the patient says that happened to him or her is the accurate thing that happened. And for us, as to each of us, in terms of different, institutions, whatever, to move forward to trying to get like a unified, or at least, a more comprehensive medical, electronic medical record to be able to provide, answers to relevant questions.
But it won't all happen at once.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be hybrid models of this whole thing. The other thing the pandemic taught us is that the limitations and hazards of observational data. I mean, we can go down the list of all the drugs that supposedly work, and then when you hold them up to the light of randomized trials, none of them really worked. So there's really no replacement for the randomized approach to all this.
Yeah, I think for patients that are watching this live or maybe later, this is important, because when a cost of a clinical trial runs up to the billions of dollars, that ultimately goes down to the price of the drug. So if the drug ends up being, successful in a way in the trial, and it lowers events, how much does it cost to lower each event when it's out in the market, and it's great to have all this myriad of amazing drugs, but if they're inaccessible to the patient, then we might as well not have them. So if we find a way to lower costs while maintaining, scientific quality and, trusting those results like you mentioned, I think that's great news for patients. They have better
Imagine
access.
what we could do with all those resources.
Those extra,
how many more
yeah.
different strategies we could test if we weren't spending that kind of money.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think the heart failure therapy is a good example. Even in the U.S. healthcare system, there are some patients that they cannot afford to be on all the medications that we prescribe to them. So I think you're bringing a great point. If that can translate into lowering the costs and having more patients that could afford the therapy, it's going to be a big win for the patients, right? Yeah.
And I think that access to drugs is the other side of the coin. We have to decrease the cost of clinical trials in a very innovative and creative way, but also if this would be translated into lower cost of medications and better access, that would be would change the care of the patients.
Yes, the other situation I think that we have talked before is how to find the right outcomes in the trial. In the last years, we have seen many trials that look for quality of life or patient feelings, and we know how important that is, but we know too that those endpoints are not as hard as when we look at mortality or hospitalization. And we have some devices and drugs that has just been approved because of showing improvement in quality of life, and some of those trials are not blinded. So what's your opinion about that?
Well, we want to add years to people's lives, but we also want to add life to those years. So I do think patients care about quality of life. One of the best endpoints is how many days were you alive and out of the hospital? No one can argue that being in a hospital is something someone wants to avoid, right? So that is a kind of endpoint that reflects science and reflects hard outcomes, but also reflects, what the patient wants and looks and feels. If you are going to do quality of life studies, I do think it's important to have blinding, even if it means some sham control studies. There's a whole list of things we thought that worked when you really hold them up to a sham control study.
Or with a trial.
Many. So particularly, as you're saying, when it comes to quality of life, we've got to really raise the bar, I think.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and it's also true that perhaps for certain conditions we want harder endpoints, but that will have to come from the regulatory agencies, because if you want a trial to be successful and want a drug to be approved, it's going to up to the agency which type of endpoints they know. If you want to add more variables that are likely to reach, you need to decide, and the regulatory agent need to decide, well, is that okay for this particular condition? And you may say, well, for condition A, quality of life is important, and for condition B, I want harder endpoints. I think it has to be individualized in that regard, Yeah.
I think a good example of that, and we talked about a bit with people from the US about this, is left atrial appendage closure.
Yeah.
It's a technology that doesn't have the best evidence in its favor, honestly, and yet we've heard that it's one of the most done procedures in the US. So how is that? How did the regulatory agencies say, okay, this is fine, and how do we control that?
Yeah, and there was a lot of argument, around and controversies around the Watchman approval, about the non-inferiority trial and the double counting for bleeding and for ischemic strokes prior to the approval, and yes, but the problem is that once the device is approved and it gets to CMS and it can be used off-label, patients literally come, demanding for the technology that it is a good technology, I think, but you're right. Once it gets approved, it gets out of the hands of the prescribing of the operators doing this procedure, right?
I think this comes back to what you were saying, and this is, it will be up to the regulatory authority, their requirements, and Mike knows this very well because it's part of the cardiorenal panel of the FDA.
Correct.
So, of course, Watchman was part of the device side of that, but,
But when we look at anticoagulants in atrial fibrillation, go back to the recent hearings on edoxaban, and they required a separation of the assessment of ischemic stroke and hemorrhagic stroke. You got to look at them separately. There's a tendency on the device side to want to lump them together. Yeah. Hemorrhagic stroke is more often disabling than ischemic stroke. When you look at safety, you are looking at the people who actually got the drug or the device. Right. When you're looking at efficacy, you're looking at everyone who is randomized. They may not have gotten it. So you can't really put safety and efficacy together because they're two different populations. Finally, the FDA, and I'm not speaking for the FDA, but regulators don't like it when you put two endpoints together where they go in opposite directions, right? So anytime you increase, the effectiveness, reduce ischemic stroke, you're going to increase hemorrhagic stroke. And the net of the whole thing is no change. Right. And that means you're driving yourself to non-inferiority when you put these together. So the FDA doesn't like that. Regulators don't like it. And so I think we have got to probably be a little more careful when we plan these trials. The other thing that happens is when you do non-inferiority trials in this space, the device side tends to use an absolute margin. We want to be within 2% of the other one. Well, what happens is we think there's going to be about 6-7% event rates. What happens is there's a 2% event rate. And then when you say, I got to be within 2%, right. How can you fail? So we also, and I wrote an editorial about this, how we really need to set probably and test for relative margins, because the absolute event rates may not be what we thought they were going to be. So I think our evidence standard really needs to be a little more rigorous than where we're at right now. Right.
Especially for non-inferiority, because the point that you said is sort of arbitrary. I mean, it's based on literature, and it's not just any random number, but in a sense, I mean, you're guessing. So you're saying I will tolerate this drug if it's up to 20% worse than the standard, and that's a self-imposed, criteria, and yeah.
Well, on the drug side, we have you must preserve half the benefit of placebo, of the drug over placebo. That kind of rigor is not applied necessarily to the device side.
Yeah, so I would say that the other point of the question would be, when we get information from the trial, how long that information lasts. I mean, when we are deciding, for example, to implant ICD for primary prevention, and when the trial were performed 10 or 15 years ago, and then someone comes and make Danish trials and says, okay, maybe in non-ischemic it doesn't work, and you feel, okay, treatment for heart failure has changed.
No,
so what's your opinion? How long does that information that we get is going to last when we decide it doesn't work anymore?
No, that's you're bringing a very important point, that it's primary prevention defibrillators for sudden cardiac arrest in heart failure patients. The original studies, trials were done many years ago, as you know, when the patients were probably less than half of the medications there are now. And the ability of these disease-modifying agents to affect the remodeling in a positive way, and the progression of the disease is huge. And on top of that, you bring the Danish trial with more contemporary medications, non-ischemics, and the benefits are marginal. So I think when it comes to the defibrillators, that's why one of the things that Heart Rhythm Society did is implement the shared decision making, in part for this reason, that it's a therapy that is available. We need to discuss with the patient and explain that it's a therapy that has shown this benefit, and it's not going to improve the quality of life, but it's going to potentially save him for a sudden cardiac arrest in the event that can happen. So the patient needs to understand that. It's not that you are giving a secondary prevention ICD, you're giving a primary prevention device to protect them for an event that may happen. So, but you're
That most likely won't happen.
it won't happen. Correct. So and when they ask you whether they can have issues with that, yes, they can have they're quite safe, they work well, but they can have inappropriate shocks, they can have complications, and the longer they have them and the more procedures they get, they can have procedure-related complications. So that's the reality. But back to your point, yeah, we don't have a standardized way to say we need to reassess this issue in X amount of years. And the other big question is who's going to pay the costs for reassessing that issue, because the company is going to say, I don't think you can put it on the company completely, right? Why they should do it, and then so who's going to pay for that huge cost and on doing again primary prevention ICD trials with contemporary medications, right? Yeah,
there's also
I don't know.
an ethical side to that, because it's already a class 1A indication.
Exactly.
How do you randomize somebody to placebo?
Exactly.
That's the hard part once a drug is approved. Even though you can say, the landscape has changed, the medication has changed. I don't know if this is helpful anymore. But at the same time, it's very hard from an ethical standpoint to say, I'll randomize you to placebo instead of an ICD, and then you have a sudden death, and how do I justify that?
I think that question applies also to, between the time you start a randomized clinical trials, the big ones, until you end the trial, the landscape has changed, so what do you do with the data you have at the end? That's a critical question. Do we have to redo the whole thing? But maybe we need to go back to the initial question. Maybe we need to do, less expensive trials and shorter, involvement period. So that would be, the question would be answered with, the current landscape of, concomitant medication or standard of care.
The other problem is we tend to keep adding things on.
Yeah.
We never take something away. And the classic example for me is like when we had aspirin, then clopidogrel came along. Well, clopidogrel showed it was better than aspirin. So what did we do? We put the two together. And we tested aspirin versus aspirin plus clopidogrel, and aspirin plus clopidogrel worked. So we said, yes, dual therapy is best. But we never tested if adding aspirin to clopidogrel would give you better outcomes. I'm not sure it would have. And here we are 30 years later talking about, well, let's see if aspirin doesn't add anything to thienopyria. It took us 30 years to figure out that maybe aspirin is the problem. And so again, we don't do a good job of taking away. We just keep giving more and more and more.
Very good point.
We've seen, regarding these changes that happen, we've seen guidelines presented, and in the same session, there's a trial, late-breaking trial, that changes a recommendation made by that guideline that was just presented. So
we need living guidelines.
Yeah,
we need to make the guidelines a living process. We're too tied to this paper world of here's the guidelines in print. No, we need to have guidelines that are electronic and digital and living, and also have the capacity, personally, I think, to have some polling about what everyone think. Do they really think this is an important new change? Yes or no?
Right.
Yeah. So we're recently wrapping up the new consensus for acute coronary syndromes for Argentina. And we polled every person that participated in the new consensus for every single recommendation to see how in accordance we were for all of them. And those that had less than 80%, we went over them again, and talked about them again, and reviewed the evidence. And I think it helps to really have a consensus and not just a...
Consensus is different than guidelines.
Well,
when we were putting together a consensus statement, I was on Twitter asking people what they thought, and we would get hundreds of people voting, and so that guided us in our consensus, which is different than a authoritarian kind of guidelines statement.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to go over to biological pacemakers? And
yes, we were waiting for Fernando to come here.
I can go call him, and then maybe.
Yes, great.
If you want to do a brief introduction,
so
we're going to talk a bit about.
But if you can look for him, we move forward.
Yeah, let's go find him.
All right. Do you need us? Or are we done?
No. You please stay here with us.
We stay.
It's great. Just to add, Fernando Escasos is one of our electrophysiologists.
Oh, okay.
He stay training, I don't know how many years. We're going to ask him in Canada. and so it will be great to have him here. So, Cecilia, we were talking about the possibility of doing research in a country like Argentina, and sometimes we get a little tired and say we don't have the money, the energy, the numbers to go for it. So
I'm not Fernando,
what's
but
your opinion?
You got called away for a procedure, so.
Okay.
So I think, as you said, we are in a country where there's not much investment in clinical research. Of course, there's CONICET, which receive grants for doing their work, which is mostly basic research. And for us who do clinical research, there's only a handful of options for that. So I think it also goes back to what Mike was saying, and I believe that being creative and innovative in terms of the type of research you want to do. I think trying to provide the answer to a clinical question, not looking at outcomes, needing like tons of patients, but maybe looking at mechanistics behind the question, and I think that would be my best advice, I would say.
Yes, I totally agree. I think that we can add a lot of information to our science, trying to understand how things are happening. The other opportunity is to performing registry and getting observational data. Sometimes that kind of information is seen not as valuable as the information that got from clinical trial. What's Dr. Gibson, your opinion about the information that we get from observational data?
Well, sometimes it can be very useful. For instance, back when I was young, did a lot of work, Chris Kane and I did, on door-to-balloon times and mortality. You're not going to randomize someone to a long door-to-balloon time and a short one. But we did see a lot of good observational data that, hey, long door-to-balloon times are associated with much higher mortality. And then we did what you do. We say, what if we changed it? So we studied about 1.5 million people over 15 years and showed that getting those times down improved outcomes. So, I think it can be useful for asking the right questions. What it's not useful for, and again, I go back to it in the pandemic, it's not useful for comparing effectiveness of drugs based upon all the confounders. So it has limitations. It can be hypothesis generating. So it has its place. What I do think we need to do, though, in medical schools, we need to pivot away from thinking that the doctor is an encyclopedia of memorized knowledge. That's what we have these for now. That we have this, we have ChatGPT. I took the board exams the other day online, and I got 85% using ChatGPT. So what's it mean now that I can score 85, get 85% right using Chat? Does that test my competence? Right. No. What we need to do is we need to reemphasize how we think, how we look at data. We need to spend more time on all of that, making us better lifelong learners than memorizing neuroanatomy or something. So I think to understand the difference between observational data and randomized trials is one of the most important things doctors need to understand, but they're not that good at understanding it. We need a lot of work there.
Eugenio, how do you see the options for a country like Argentina? And you have been part of performing physiological studies from the beginning. Indeed, in your field, in biological pacemaker, you started from the beginning. What's your point of view for that issue?
I think talking about costs, like when you want to develop one of these therapies, there's a lot of cost involved in all the preclinical development, right? And I think it's back to your question about a country like Argentina to be able to support that, it will require a big commitment from government funding to develop that, because the way it usually works, in Europe and in the U.S., all these preclinical developments are done initially by an academic lab funded by the government. In the case of the U.S. by the NIH, and mostly, and then once that discovery has some hope, maybe some company will pick that up and get it to what it needs to be applied in humans. But it's very difficult if you come up with a very good, idea to be able to get industry to develop that. Usually, that initial phase of the development, it's done with government funding. That's why there's so-called editorials written about the famous Valley of Death, about a lot of great discoveries that they looked very good clinically, but they fall short because no one picked up to the next phase. Because the other issue that you encounter is that when you get and you need to go to the preclinical stage and you want to do it in patients, the cost of developing these agents, they rise exponentially. You need to have a GMP lab and do everything clinical grade, and often the federal fundings to those research projects are more limited. So you're in that situation where your good idea, but it's early enough, but it's not late enough to be picked up by the private sector, and then you fall in that between. Wow. So I think it's an important point, and really to develop this preclinical to clinical stages that require a big commitment from government and money, in my opinion.
And regarding biological pacemaker, what step are you in your research?
So right now we've been studying this for over 20 years now, and I gave multiple lectures, and many times they ask me how long until we go to patients.
Yes, we're not going to be ready.
And I stopped giving a round number, because I learned from myself that I said like 5 years, and then 5 years later I was in another AHA meeting, having the same question. So what stage are we? Well, we have the biological candidates, and we are in the process of doing that into GMP, which is a facility that manufactures a vector that can be given to humans, right? And we have our meetings with the FDA, with CBER, as a form of a pre-IND, and we got excellent feedback from them to what's the next stage that we need to do, and that is be able to build this in a clinical ready and do toxicology and safety in animals with a clinical grade material. So the FDA, rightly so, with these new modalities, it's very strict with safety, right? If it doesn't work, it's one thing, but you want to make sure that you have a safe product for the patients, and so that's what we are now. To trying to build that GMP grade and get the formal toxicology studies that you usually, the agency requires not to do it in-house, but to get an external person to do the toxicology. So you can have a independent CRO, a different lab that will do that for you to prove safety in a different environment, in different labs. So I think it's good, yeah.
So when you started that, did you get government funding, or was it, Cedars-Sinai, helping you and supporting you, and then maybe got funding? How was the initial process when you first got the idea towards implementation?
Yeah. So the initial, when I started working on this, was funded by NIH grants. Initially a K award when I was finishing my fellowship, and then two NIH R01s, and also the institution gave me startup money to support that, because believe it or not, these large animal experiments to develop a product like this, even with one or two NIH R01s, there are great grants, and you can do a lot of good things. That money goes pretty fast when you start to that late phase that I mentioned. If you want to start clinical grade material, if you want to outsource your toxicology, the expenses of that, they grow exponentially.
I think that we now that you have to be patient and not make promise regarding dates because it's really take time.
It
really
takes time, and I think it's like rightly so. Like as a clinician, the last thing I want to do is just to push something into one of my patients that is not ready. I think it needs to be done. You cannot jump steps. I think, especially with the safety and the toxicology, it's very important. We are seeing in some of the clinical trials for gene therapy for ARVC, there have been some issues recently that's been like publicly, available, and with the AAV vector in particular, and they've been using that for many years, and then when they start treating these particular conditions, they have some adverse outcomes, and that can happen. And I think when something like that happens, it's bad not only for the product but for the field of gene therapy itself.
Yes.
So I think it's very important to do all your steps very carefully, preclinically, prior to going to humans. Yeah.
Yes. Well, very, very good luck with that. Fortunately, I think that it's a field that still needs that tool. I mean, in the coronary care unit, every day we see patients that we said it would be great to have those one of temporary pacemaker and not introducing any kind of wire to our patients. That would be great. So the need still is there. So good luck with that.
No, thank you. I think it's exciting, and I'm cautiously optimistic, but it's important to have all the safety data prior to go on that route.
So 2 years. That's what I was going to say. 2 or 3 years from now.
Yeah, it's 6 months.
Alan, creo que estamos. We are finishing, so you are in charge of this meeting, and you can thanks everyone and invite tomorrow to our meeting.
Yeah. So just to wrap it up in English, thank you all of you for being here and chatting with us today, and for everyone out there who's watching. Switch quickly to Spanish to give a brief message to close up. Todos los que están mirando, invitadísimos a PreCongreso mañana. PreCongreso histórico, diría, tenemos más de 10.000 inscriptos, récord total desde que empezamos con los PreCongresos. Así que esperamos que la rural va a estar muy, muy llena de gente, con muchas ganas de ver todos estos temas de innovación y tecnología que vamos a presentar. Tenemos invitados de lujo, como los que están aquí presentes, y algunos más también, así que muchísima información para que vayan mirando. Los esperamos con muchas ansias mañana, venimos trabajando hace mucho en esto, así que con mucha felicidad los esperamos mañana en la rural a partir de las 8:30 para el PreCongreso del ICBA. Gracias.
Gracias.
Gracias. That was the only word I know. Gracias.